The words sank into her chest, heavy and undeniable. She wanted to look away, to break the intensity, but something inside her wouldn't let her. Instead, her fingers traced the rim of the teacup on the table, as if holding on to something solid. "Might anchor her, Ryan," she began, but her voice faded. What could she possibly say? That she had chosen Daniel, that she had built a life with him. Even though pieces of her heart sometimes wondered about the other paths, one where she had said yes to Ryan instead. He took a small step forward, closing the space between them. His voice dropped lower. Gentler. "You deserve more than empty promises and phone calls from hotel rooms." Her throat tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "I've watched you. All these years, Em. You put everyone else first, but who put you first?" Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, and she hated herself for it. She didn't want Ryan to see her vulnerability, didn't want him to know that his words weren't wrong. Because the truth was, she was lonely. She had been lonely for longer than she cared to admit. The silence stretched between them, charged and unspoken. The rain kept drumming against the glass, as if urging them closer. Emily forced herself to stand straighter. "Ryan, please, you should go. It's not right for you to be here." But he didn't move. His hand brushed lightly against the table, fingertips grazing the spot just inches from hers. The gesture was small, almost accidental, but it sent a rush of heat through her. "You used to smile differently," he whispered. "Back then, with me." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He was too close to the truth, too close to the ache she buried every night when she climbed into an empty bed. She pulled her hand back quickly, shaking her head. "This is crazy. You're Daniel's best friend. He trusts you." Ryan's expression shifted, a flash of pain crossing his face. "I know. Believe me, I know. That's why I've kept my distance. But tonight, when I saw that door open, I couldn't walk away." Her pulse raced. She wanted to push him out, to slam the door and lock it tight. But some part of her didn't. Some part of her wanted him to stay, wanted the weight of his presence to fill the space Daniel had left. Empty dot, the clock on the wall ticked loudly, pulling her back to reality. It was after midnight now, the hour where truth came easier, where loneliness deepened into something harder to resist. Emily turned toward the window, trying to gather herself. "We can't do this," she whispered. Ryan's voice was softer, now almost breaking. "I'm not asking for anything, Em. I just needed you to know I never stopped caring." Her chest ached at his words, her eyes closing against the truth she didn't want to face. She wanted to tell him to stop, to leave, but instead, silence filled the room. And in that silence, she realized something dangerous leaving the door. Open hadn't just let Ryan inside her house. It had let the past back into her heart. The kitchen felt smaller than it ever had before. Emily stood by the counter, her arms folded across her chest, trying to build some invisible barrier between herself and Ryan. But no wall could hide the truth of what was happening. The air between them was charged, humming with something she couldn't name but could feel in every breath. Outside, the rain had become heavier, a steady rhythm against the glass, as though the night itself was pressing closer. The back door, the very one she had forgotten to lock, still stood ajar, letting in a faint draft that carried the smell of wet earth. She thought about closing it, but she couldn't bring herself to move. Not while Ryan was still standing there. They sat at the kitchen table, not side by side, but close enough that every glance, every movement felt magnified. Ryan leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table, his fingers tracing the grain of the wood. Emily tried not to notice how his hand was just inches from hers. She wrapped her fingers around her mug, though the tea had long gone cold, for a while. They spoke about safe things, the weather, the neighborhood, even the new family that had moved into the corner house. Their words were polite, but underneath them was a current of something deeper, something neither of them dared to name out loud. Then Ryan's voice shifted. He didn't look away when he asked, "Do you ever regret it?" Emily blinked, her heart skipping. "Regret what?" she asked, though part of her already knew. His eyes searched hers, choosing him instead of me. The words landed heavy. In the room, Emily's breath caught, her pulse racing so hard she thought he might hear it. She wanted to laugh it off, to tell him it was ridiculous, that she had never thought of him that way. But the truth hung in the silence, undeniable. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. What could she say? That sometimes in the quiet moments of her marriage, she did wonder about the road not taken. That Daniel, though dependable, had slowly become a stranger to her in the very house they shared. That Ryan, sitting across from her now, had once been the boy who almost kissed her under the stars and she had never forgotten. Her silence said more than words ever could. Ryan leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. "I knew it," he said softly. "I could see it even then. You loved him, yes, but a part of you was mine." Emily's throat tightened. "Oh, Ryan, don't. I'm not trying to ruin anything," he interrupted quickly, though his voice cracked with the weight of his feelings. I can't pretend anymore. I've tried for years. I've stood by, watched you build a life with him, watched you smile even when I knew you weren't happy. Do you know what that feels like?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Ryan," he reached out suddenly, his hand brushing against hers on the table. It was a simple touch, just the slightest contact of skin, but it sent a jolt through her. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she didn't pull away. For a moment, her fingers almost curled toward his. The rain hammered harder against the windows, drowning out the sound of her racing heart. She felt trapped between the life she had and the life she might have had, two doors, both open, both impossible to step through without breaking something. "You can't say these things," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not to me. Not when you feel it too," Ryan finished, his voice low but certain. Her eyes widened, a protest ready on her lips. But the truth was there, plain as the ache in her chest. She did feel it, the dangerous nearness of him, the pull of something forbidden but real, stronger than she wanted to admit. Emily stood abruptly, stepping back from the table. "This isn't right," she said, her voice unsteady. "You're Daniel's friend. He trusts you. I trusts us." Ryan stood too, closing the space between them. He didn't touch her, but his presence alone was overwhelming. "And what about you, Em? Do you trust him with your heart the way you used to? Does he even see you anymore?" Her eyes filled, a tear slipping down her cheek before she could stop it. She hated that Ryan saw her this way, hated that his words dug into the hollow places she tried to ignore. He lifted a hand, hesitated, then gently brushed the tear away with his thumb. The tenderness of the gesture broke something inside her. Her breath came shallow, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink to just the space between them. It would have been so easy to close the gap, to let herself fall into the warmth of his arms, to forget the vows, the distance. The husband who might not even be thinking of her tonight. Her lips parted, the temptation unbearable. Ryan leaned closer, his eyes locked on hers, his breath mingling with hers in the small, fragile space that remained. And then headlights. A sudden flash of light cut through the rain-streaked window. The sound of a car door slamming echoed from outside. Emily froze. Ryan pulled back, his jaw tightening, his eyes flicking toward the window. She rushed to it, her stomach dropping as she saw the familiar shape of the car pulling into the driveway. Her husband's car. Daniel was home. Early. Her heart pounded as panic surged through her chest. What would he see if he walked in now? What would he know if he looked at her and Ryan in this kitchen, in the middle of the night, with the door wide open and silence too heavy to explain? Ryan's eyes met hers, a storm of emotions swirling within. Them fear, longing, pain. He knew as well as she did that one wrong move could shatter everything. And Emily, her hands trembling, he realized the most dangerous thing of all. It wasn't forgetting to close the door. It was the fact that she hadn't. Wanted to? The house was too quiet that night. Emily Parker always thought silence was supposed to bring peace, but lately it felt heavy like a weight pressing against her chest. She lived in a 2-story home on a quiet street in Portland, Oregon, with neat gardens, trimmed hedges, and a porch light that always flickered as if refusing to give steady comfort. Her husband, Daniel, was away on another work trip, one of many that had pulled him out of their lives over the years. She had grown used to the pattern his bags by the door, a quick kiss on her cheek, the hum of his car fading down the street. "I'll call you every night," he always promised, and sometimes he did. Other times the calls came late or not at all. Emily never complained. She told herself this was marriage. You compromise, you endure. You understand? But when she lay in bed alone, the silence was louder than any explanation he gave. That night she wandered through the house as the clock ticked toward midnight. She checked the windows, turned off the lights, and held her mug of chamomile tea between her palms. Normally, she would walk straight to the back door and turn the lock. It was part of her nightly ritual, something she did almost without thinking. But her mind wasn't with her body, it was drifting. She thought of the way Daniel laughed when they first met, how his eyes used to light up whenever she walked into the room. She thought of the long drives they once took with the windows rolled down, music blasting, their hands tangled together on the gear shift. Those memories still lived inside her, but they felt far away now, like old photographs, fading with time. Lately, whenever Daniel called, the conversations were short. "How's work?" she asked. "Busy, but fine," he replied. "How's the hotel?" "It's fine, Em. I'll be back before you know it." Before you know it. That was what he always said. Before you know it kept stretching into weeks. Emily sighed and placed the empty mug in the sink. She should have gone straight upstairs. Instead, she walked to the kitchen window and stared out at the dark yard. The rain had started again, a soft drizzle that tapped against the glass. It was Oregon rain, gentle, steady, endless. The kind that made you want to curl up under a blanket and wait for morning. She pressed her fingers against the cool glass and let her mind wander. If Daniel were home, maybe they'd be curled up on the couch watching old movies. Maybe he'd be teasing her for always falling asleep halfway through. Maybe he'd hold her hand the way he used to without thinking. But Daniel wasn't there. And lately, even when he was, he felt far away. Her eyes flicked toward the back door. She meant to lock it. She really did. But instead she told herself she'd do it in a minute. She turned on the kettle again, made another cup of tea she didn't need, and sat at the small kitchen table. The clock on the wall ticked. 11:55. 11:58. Midnight. Emily leaned her head into her hand, staring at the steam rising from her cup. The house hummed with the sound of the fridge and the faint drip of rain against the back steps. It felt safe enough. Safe enough to forget the lock, just this once. She finished her tea and finally stood, stretching. She would go to bed. She would sleep. Maybe tomorrow Daniel would call earlier and things would feel lighter. She walked halfway down the hall when she heard it. A sound, small but sharp, enough to stop her heart. It was the faint creak of hinges, the unmistakable groan of the back door moving. Her body froze. For a second, she told herself it was nothing, just the wind, maybe the rain against the frame. But deep down, she knew. The door. She hadn't locked it. Slowly, carefully, she turned. The hallway stretched behind her, dimly lit by the small lamp on the kitchen counter. Her chest rose and fell too quickly, her breath shaky, and then she saw him. A shadow, tall, standing in the kitchen doorway. Her pulse raced so loud she thought she could hear it in her ears. She opened her mouth to scream, but the words died before they came out, because it wasn't a stranger. It was Ryan Matthews. Emily blinked, her fear colliding with confusion. Ryan, she whispered. He stepped forward, the dim light catching his face. Older now, but familiar. His dark hair wet from the rain, his jacket clinging to his shoulders. His eyes blue, steady, unreadable, looked straight at her. "It's late," Emily managed to say. "What are you doing here?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He looked at the open door behind him, then back at her. His voice was low, rough, carrying something more than concern. "Your door was open," he said softly. "I was walking by and saw it. I thought something might be wrong." Her heart was still racing, but for a different reason now. Ryan wasn't just anyone. He had been her neighbor since childhood, the boy who carried her boxers when she moved into the house, the friend who once sat on the porch with her through long summer nights. And years ago, long before Daniel, he had been something almost more, something she never dared to name. Seeing him there standing in her kitchen at midnight made her. Chest ache was something she hadn't expected to feel. Emily forced a smile, though her hands still trembled. "I must have forgotten to close it," she said quickly. "But thank you. Really." Ryan's eyes lingered on her, steady and searching. For a moment, the silence between them felt louder than any words. "You shouldn't be alone like this," he said finally, his voice quiet but certain. "Daniel leaves you too often." Emily's breath caught. The way he said it wasn't just concern. It was something heavier, sharper, like he could see straight into her loneliness. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked away, not trusting herself to meet his gaze. The rain kept falling, steady and soft. The door behind him swayed slightly with the breeze, still open, still inviting the night inside. And Emily, standing in the middle of her quiet house, realized something. Her mistake wasn't just forgetting to close the door. Her mistake was letting someone in. Emily stood in the middle of the kitchen, her back pressed slightly against the counter, as if keeping distance would somehow calm the storm inside her. The rain outside had grown heavier, and the sound of it hitting the windows seemed to echo her racing heartbeat. Ryan Matthews. She hadn't said his name aloud in years. Not really, not in the way it had once lived on her tongue during her younger days. And yet here he was standing in her kitchen past midnight, stark jacket dripping rainwater onto the tiled floor, his presence filling the room in a way that unsettled her. "Ryan," she said again, softer this time, as though speaking his name might change the reality of seeing him. "Why are you really here?" He gave a small shrug, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "I told you. The door was wide open. You live alone right now, Em? You can't be too careful." Em. The nickname slipped out naturally, and her chest tightened. Daniel used to call her that, back when their love felt new, but he hadn't, in a long time. Hearing it now, from Ryan's lips, carried a strange mix of warmth and danger. Emily tried to steady her breathing. "I appreciate you checking, but it's late. You should go home." For a moment, he didn't move. His gaze swept across the kitchen, the kettle on the counter, the empty tea mug in the sink, the folded blanket draped over the chair. His eyes lingered as if memorizing the details of her life, the pieces of her loneliness she didn't admit to anyone. Finally, he said quietly, "I don't like the thought of you being here all by yourself. Daniel leaves you too often." The words struck her harder than she wanted them to. She swallowed and forced a smile, but her lips trembled. "He works. It's not his fault. It's just how it is." But Ryan's expression didn't change. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, his wet hair falling slightly into his eyes. He looked older now, more grounded. But those eyes, the same ones from their childhood, still carried the weight of unspoken truths. "Do you remember?" he asked slowly, "the summer before you left for college? We sat on my porch every night for weeks, just talking about everything and nothing." Emily's breath caught. Of course, she remembered. How could she forget? Those nights had been the closest thing to happiness she had known before Daniel. She and Ryan had shared laughter, secrets, even silence without discomfort. And once, just when he had leaned in so close, she thought he would kiss her. But he didn't. Instead, he whispered, "Don't forget me, okay?" And then, weeks later, she met Daniel. "Of course, I remember," she said softly. Though she tried to keep her voice steady, Ryan's jaw tightened. "I never forgot.